Welcome, capital raisers. Will Matheson joined us today to break down how he scaled to 100 million AUM, grew his company, and retained most of his investors along the way. Are you guys ready to raise? Shout out to Invest Next, our portal of choice, and our great friends at the Family Office Club. Do not miss the Strategic Capital Raise Conference on June 6th and 7th, 2024. Richard Wilson, Zach Capdenstall, and a bunch of your other favorite capital raisers will be there to knock your socks off. Register at strategiccapitalraise.com. With that, it's Capital Raiser Show episode 302, and it starts now. Rock and roll. I got Will Matheson on the Capital Raiser Show. Welcome, my friend, dude. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, man. It's a pleasure, man. Very good. For anybody in the audience that doesn't know, this is the first time Will and I have met. So really looking forward to diving into his business model, talking shop on capital raising, and who knows what else we're going to talk about. Capital Raiser Show Season 4, powered by the Family Office Club and our new sponsor, Invest Next. So really excited. Man, Will, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in real estate syndications and raising capital and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so coming out of undergrad, my first job was as a commercial real estate broker at Matheson, primarily doing retail, but with a little bit of student housing, a little bit of multifamily sprinkled in there. I was working with my twin brother at the time out of the Raleigh, North Carolina office. And we really decided, brokerage is great, but it's a lot of hard work. And you don't own anything, and it's purely transactional. It's one deal, and then you got to find the next and find the next and find the next, which is still the case, mind you. But we said we really wanted to get on the ownership side. So we left brokerage. We went to Columbia University. They have a master's in real estate development program. We did that. And before we graduated, we bought our first deal with one of our classmates. And ever since then, we've done 14 acquisitions, primarily in the Carolinas, total value over $100 million.
Sweet, dude. So is it my understanding from the stuff that I've been reading that you have a plan to acquire $1 billion worth of real estate?
I mean, I have a plan. I hope we're able to do that, but I do have a plan for it.
And what is that plan? Just out of curiosity.
Just keep buying more. It's one of those things. I like to joke with people that we're in this position today where none of the deals where we're the primary sponsor, we do not have floating rate debt. So our investors are pretty happy. We sold a bunch of stuff before they started raising rates. We have a lot of happy investors. We don't have any deals hanging over our heads. So we look pretty clean right now, and we're going to continue growing our investor base, growing our brokerage connections, and just keep trying to take it one acquisition at a time.
Okay, so there's a lot of stuff.
Or maybe 2 or 3 acquisitions at a time. If a portfolio comes up, you don't want to turn it down.
Of course not. Yeah, I participated in a 670 unit portfolio, so I get it, right? So just a fractional tiny piece. So don't get me wrong, I'm not the owner of the entire thing. But you mentioned RE Real Estate Development Program, I believe at Columbia. So are you getting into development, or tell me more about that?
I mean, real estate development's it's possibly an overly broad term. I have no plans of getting into ground up development anytime soon. You learn about development, you learn about finance, you learn about debt, you make a lot of great connections. It's not specifically you have to do ground up development. There's a lot of finance aspects to it as well.
Tell me about your business model. What is it that you are acquiring? Is it all in North Carolina?
Everything we own today is in North Carolina, although we're in the process of buying an asset in the Charleston, South Carolina area. Of the 14 acquisitions we've done, I want to say 9 have been in North Carolina, 3 have been in South Carolina, 2 have been in Florida. We primarily look in North and South Carolina, with Virginia, Tennessee, and Georgia, the bordering states. We check out those as well. But our business model, I don't like to overcomplicate it. We look for good real estate where we can get returns for our investors. We've done multifamily, we've done student housing, we've done stuff that was built in 2021, we've done stuff that was built in the 1960s, we've done stabilized, we've done heavy value add. Wherever there's an opportunity that we think we have some competitive advantage or we can drive returns for investors, that's where we're looking. It's not as specifically, it has to be 1980s construction, 1990s construction. We don't have the Leonardo DiCaprio rule of no buildings over 25 years old. We don't have that either. We look at a lot of the stuff.
So I've never heard of the Leonardo DiCaprio rule. What is that?
There's a running joke that Leonardo DiCaprio dumps any girlfriend he has as soon as she turns 25.
Hilarious. Oh my God, that's funny. Okay, so how do your investors feel about you participating in the variety of multifamily asset classes?
They've liked it. We have pretty high investor retention rate. It's well north of 75% when they've had the
Woo!
opportunity to
All right,
invest
let's stop
multiple
right
times.
there because this is like the basic thing that I'm looking for when I'm vetting GPs is like, what is your investor retention rate? And a lot of people are like happy to brag about 50%. And like when I hear somebody say 70%, I know that their investor communications is real strong, their investor experience is real strong. So how did you, because that's not easy to get that percentage of retention. Tell me more about how you have built your business so that you can get people to come back. What are the main things that people like?
So I would say one of the big factors for us in terms of generating a lot of retention has been we started very small. Our first acquisition was a duplex and we only held it for 2 months. The next acquisition was 6 units. We held it for, I don't know, 18 months, 16 months, something like that. Our entire business plan when we started was short term holds so we could generate higher IRRs, bring people round trip. Our sales pitch was I bought my first property when I was 25. You're not going to invest with me for the next 10 years because there's a guy who's been in this business for 20 years who's offering you the same thing. I'm going to offer you heavy value add, a nice, like really good IRR on a deal. And we would always tell people, I want you to date us. I don't want you to marry us. I don't want you to make that type of commitment. You're not locked
I
into
like
this
that.
deal. So we did a lot of deals in our first 2 to 3 years that were just really short term, big home run deals. A lot of things worked out at that time, but we sold most of our portfolio from, I want to say, Q4 2021 to Q1 2022. So our timing was pretty good. But yeah, we just focused on how can we get you quick returns, build the track record. We can put it on the scoreboard, so to speak, show new investors 40% average IRR, have our old investors who are obviously happy. Not that there's anything wrong with clipping coupons or anything, but showing a 40% sure feels a lot better. So that was our plan. And that's what we executed for the first 3 plus years that we were buying assets. Really 4 years, pretty much. Our first 4 years, it was all short term hold focused, with the exception of one or two properties. And that made a lot of happy investors and got a lot of referrals for us.
So were those deals JV deals or were they syndications?
Syndications.
They were syndications. Okay. So at what point in your history did you go from small multifamilies to bigger syndications? And yeah, let's start there.
It's been a gradual process throughout. I could rattle off the price points. In 2018, the acquisitions were, let's say, 800,000, 1.4. In 2019, I think they were 915,000, 1.13 million, 3.3 million. 2020, it was 2.236 million and 2.75 million. Then in 2021, we kind of took another step. I think we did a 7.69 million. We worked with a larger sponsor on a 25 million. In 2022, we worked with that same sponsor on essentially a $60 million property. And then we were the lead sponsor on 12 million, 8 million, 10 million. So far this year, we're under contract on another $7 million property, and we just closed a $16 million property. So it's been a gradual effort to size up, obviously, in today's environment. If you find a good deal, you take the good deal. It's not like there's an abundance of listings out there.
So multifamily in a variety of capacities. Are you looking at all at any other asset classes, self storage or assisted living? You know, I guess there's all these little factions and little parts of multifamily. Some people are leaving multifamily value add and going into sub niches like heavy lift or my case, horizontal or better said, development of build to rent subdivisions. But I see people going into a variety of different kind of little sub niches, and some people are leaving altogether and getting into RV parks or campgrounds or a variety of things. So are you pretty true to multifamily? That's all that you want to do over the next few years, or are you ready to pivot at some point in the future? Tell me your thoughts on this.
So we look at student housing as well, and we've bought student housing properties as well. I think that's a really nice complement to multifamily. Otherwise, one of the members of our team has some experience in industrial, so we've tasked him with, "Hey, do you want to look at some industrial?" I have a family history in industrial. I have some uncles and cousins who are brokers in Canada in industrial brokerage. But by and large, we feel really good about multifamily. The supply and demand dynamics are still there. It's still increasingly hard to build new multifamily, seemingly everywhere in the country, not just in the major metros. And here, I'll give you this for my outside the mainstream opinion. I think it's a great time to buy. And I don't say that for strictly like sales purposes. I think it's a good time to buy multifamily because so many buyers have left the market because financing is incredibly difficult. But if you're able to buy a property today, your financing might be hard, but it's if you have prepayment flexibility, you're buying in a forced sale environment with very little competition. Is if markets become more liquid, I think you could be hitting a home run.
Okay, so who's on your team right now? How's gonna, and I'll tee you up a little bit because I'm gonna be very curious about this particular concept that doesn't get talked about in podcasts, which is the scaling of an organization in syndication and becoming a leader of people and having people look up to you and having to be there at all times and being responsible for that and not just like disappearing to go on vacation or whatever. What's that process been like for you?
I'm incredibly fortunate because my business partner, the co-founder of this company, is my twin brother, Evan. So outside of Evan, within our direct team, we have two other people, analyst, asset management, Alex and Corinne. And we also have a partner in Charlotte, Fabio, who handles a lot of property management operations whenever we have a chance to, let's say, owner manage properties, so to speak. But my brother Evan, my twin brother Evan, he's my partner. So if I do want to go on vacation or he wants to go on vacation, all of our investors know we're twins, or I'm pretty sure they all know we're twins. If for some reason I'm unavailable, look, it's not exactly the same, but the conversation's going to be 90% the same. We have a lot of shared life experiences and mannerisms. So
Okay, so partnering versus being the lead GP. What is your preferred strategy?
So personally for us, we like to be the lead GP. You and I were discussing before the call, I think there's three bottlenecks in this industry. There's the ability to see deals. How well can you talk to brokers? Are you only seeing stuff that's on market? Are you seeing stuff before it's coming to market? Or are you seeing stuff that's off market? There's your ability to see deals. That's one. The second bottleneck is your ability to analyze deals. Because if you get 100 deals in a day and you can't analyze them, what was the point? Your third bottleneck is your ability to raise capital. And we have always felt that our bottleneck, that's why I come on shows like this, our bottleneck has always been the ability to raise capital. And since that is our issue, we don't typically like to go in as a co GP or the non lead GP because if we were to find a deal and we raised $5 million for someone else's project, it's that puts us in a tough position when we want to be the lead sponsor.
So I run across, and even in my own mindset, I think there's a lot of people that want their investor ticket card badge says, oh, yeah, now I'm an investor. Now I'm a syndicator. And a lot of people that I come across, they're just like, I want to be the lead GP. And then I run across these older gentlemen that are just like, dude, I've done that. I'm tired of it. It's a ton of work. I just kind of want to kick back and raise capital. From your perspective, what do you see there? Like, do you want to be the lead GP forever? You don't mind the full, you like the control, you want the full ownership capacity and being like the person that's at the top of the pyramid, or how important is that to you?
I mean, I don't like to speak too far in the future. If for the next 20, I'm 31 today, so I could easily see being the lead GP for 20 plus years at this point. But you just tell me I'm 60 years old, I have all of these relationships, and some young whippersnapper comes up to me trying to raise money on a deal in a market I know really well. Like I could help him out. I can't speak to it in an absolute. I completely understand a former GP just saying, "Oh, I don't want to do all the work, but let me dabble on the sides." That makes a ton of sense to me.
Okay, cool.
I feel like it's a non-answer, but like I can't speak
It,
for what
it's
I'm
a
going to want to
perfect
do 30
answer.
years from now.
Exactly. No, I get it. I get it. I want to dive into the bottlenecks because I think a lot of people can understand the concept, but they're not actually practicing the analyzation of bottlenecks. So tell me, like, from somebody that is kind of just out there buying deals, raising capital, and they're not really focused on finding out these things that can really increase their business. How important is it to identify your bottlenecks? What's your process for doing that?
I don't necessarily have a process for identifying the bottleneck. It's always been self-evident for us, but it's pretty simple. If you can't underwrite every deal you see, you have an analysis problem. If you don't see any deals that are not marketed, you have an access problem. And if you can't raise the money for your deals, you have a capital problem. That's my simple summary of it.
Okay, cool. All right. How are the lending changes affecting your business and how are you circumnavigating them?
I'm fortunate to say, like I mentioned earlier, that none of the stuff where we're a lead sponsor has floating rate debt. So we're not dealing with some pending rate cap implosion, or we bought a deal with 4% interest rate. And now it's a 9% interest rate because, quite frankly, no amount of value add is going to outpace that type of growth. So, all of our existing stuff hasn't been impacted too much by the lending changes. On the acquisition front, it's essentially you either have to go agency debt, which was essentially unheard of for an acquisition in, say, 2020, 21, and 22, or what we really value in bank debt at this point is flexibility because everyone thinks, knows, however you want to phrase it, everyone thinks we're near the top of the rate hikes. So as soon as you're near the top, that means more likely to go down. Banks are really expensive today, but if you have no prepayment penalty and you can buy in today's market, rates go down, the 10-year goes back into the threes, you could be refinancing. You could do a 7% acquisition loan, refinance to 5% debt. I want the flexibility. That's the number one thing we're looking for in a loan, prepayment flexibility.
How long are you holding your assets? And has that changed since the economic climate has become different?
So that's a difficult question for us because, like I said, I think we had sold just about everything in our portfolio except one 2019 Everything we bought before 2021 has been sold except one property that was refinanced, and that's going to be held for a long time, and that's 2.8% debt. There's another property we bought December of 21. That's our oldest acquisition. So you don't want to sell in today's environment. We don't have debt coming due for almost 2 years on any of our projects. So we'll be holding at least until 2025. And as far as how we're looking at existing opportunities, we're typically modeling 3 to 5 year holds. Again, with the prepayment flexibility, if the market started picking up in 2024, the end of 2024, early 2025, we want to be in a position to sell that. So we'd still go short term on hold. It's about making money. It's about delivering for the investors. And if that opportunity presents itself, I don't have a problem selling in a year and a day, as long as they get their capital gains treatment.
Are there any of these deals that you want to keep forever? What's your perception or perspective on generational wealth and keeping assets that you can leave to your children?
For me personally, I have friends who talk about real estate they've owned and they sold it in the 80s and they look at it now and it's like, oh, we sold it for 300,000 and now it's worth 30 million. I understand all of that. However, given that we're buying these properties with investors and when we raise the money, we're showing, finite hold periods of 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever that number is. We're not fully comfortable just, hey, we've just refinanced, you're locked in for 10 years, or we're going to have to do a bunch of redemptions and things like that because people want to leave. So we typically try to stick to the hold periods we advertise to investors. As far as personally, I don't own anything outright with just my company, so hasn't really been an issue.
So, do you have an approach? Because it seems like you give me some really simple answers here, but I'm curious about when it comes to reverse engineering your $1 billion portfolio, what kind of things are you looking for? Specifically, gear this to the person that's looking to scale. Should they take, well, I guess you shouldn't should on anybody, but what's your approach to figuring out the way that you're going to get to $1 billion? And Do you have any words of advice for the person that wants to get there too?
I actually broke this out at one point last year and what you would have to do if you wanted to. My simple solution was if you just double your acquisition volume every single year, you'd get there before you know it.
I
But
see.
I don't. Well,
Okay.
I mean, that's typically the trajectory of an earlier company, and you've seen groups like Rise 48 and Tides and Knit, all these other syndication groups that have really shot up out of nowhere. I know that some of them are in a bit of trouble at the moment. Floating rate debt will do that, but you've seen other groups scale, so it is possible. My advice to people starting out, I have 5 things I routinely tell people, but the most important one is start small. You really want to start with smaller properties because it's the less efficient part of the market. The bigger the property gets, it almost becomes a commodity, whether Graystar or some other manager is managing it. It's really the only way to drive value is through capital infusion. The market's less efficient in, let's say, the sub 50 unit space. So you want to start small, not only because there's more inefficiency to capitalize on, but there's less competition, brokers. Sometimes you'll find a property on the MLS, which you're not going to find for 250 units. So I always tell people just focus on the smaller stuff. Another reason to do that, by the way, is if you're a broker that sells 200 unit properties or $20 million properties, pick your metric. And I come in out of nowhere, I've never owned anything, I've never bought anything before, and I say, I want to buy this. Well, this broker already knows everyone else in the market who owns a $20 million property. He's sold to them, he's sold for them, he has relationships with all of them. So if you're going to come in and start at $20 million, I have a feeling like if you're going to win that deal, you're probably overpaying by a pretty significant amount.
Seen that happen,
Yeah,
especially
I mean, to the
when you're competing against like Rise 48. Yeah, you might overpay what they're offering.
well, so like that's another reason I say start small. I'll use an example from our own experience. We bought 15 unit deal in Somerville, South Carolina, part of Charleston MSA. It wasn't huge, it's $1.13 million acquisition, February 2019. That deal helped give us the credibility to buy a 24 unit, $3.3 million property in Charlotte, North Carolina, December of 2019. We do another acquisition in Somerville. Again, the fact that we'd just done that Charlotte closing helped. Even though it wasn't in the same market, we had credibility with brokers in the Carolinas because they knew we could close. So we get this off market deal, or actually, it was a property marketed on the MLS. Great place to look when you're starting out. We buy this deal, 32 units for $2.2 million. Right after we do that, this property comes to market in Somerville, South Carolina, Charleston MSA, like I said. I already own 2 properties in the market. But the reason we got called by the broker on that deal is because he heard we bought the deal in Charlotte. He didn't even know we had bought the other 2 assets in the market. But just we built up the credibility slowly. We didn't try to buy a $10 million property with 0 track record. Also, just saying, the smaller the property, the easier it is to raise the money because there's less money to raise. It increases your chance of success. I'm always amazed by people who are able to dive right into the deep end to do $7 million raise on their first deal. I'm always impressed.
Yeah, you don't want to compare yourself to other people. Just be better than you were yesterday is what my mentor, Wayne Dyer, would say. Now, you talked about growing your investor database a little bit earlier. I'd love to hear probably 2-part question, but let's start with the first part, which is what have you done to grow your investor base to what it is today so far?
Our original investor base growth was all based on essentially word of mouth and just plain networking. That was it. We would get our early investors. We would, once we provided for them or delivered for them, because again, we were doing such short-term holds, we would just say, like, I'm trying to buy bigger stuff. Can you refer me to anyone else? You're happy with what I've done. So that was a lot of it. Increasingly, we've been getting, that was the beginning. I want to say like the first 200 people on our investor list was probably something like that. Increasingly, it's primarily been driven through just, let's say, LinkedIn or our website or SEO, things along those lines. Maybe like podcasts like this.
So do you have a plan for additional marketing, educating, and nurturing, or are you just going to kind of do what you've been doing so far?
We always have other new plans in the works, whether that's just more targeted stuff. We've got a lot of different approaches that we're always trying to work out, but education-wise, not particularly, no. Just general marketing.
Okay, so you mentioned some of the asset classes that you're interested in so far that you've been participating in, but it's a little bit agnostic. You mentioned anything that makes sense you would kind of tackle. Are there any things in the future that you want to diversify into, or are you pretty much interested in doing what you've been doing so far?
We primarily want to focus on multifamily student housing. As I mentioned, we have a guy on our team who's done some industrial work, so we tell him to do that. But I feel like I've contradicted myself on another podcast, but I always joke that our company name is Matheson Capital. It's not Matheson Multifamily and Student Housing Investing.
Mm.
So if we see opportunities in a sector, we're going to do it. Like I said, when I was a retail broker, we were primarily doing retail. Or when I was at Marcus and Millichap, we were primarily doing retail. So I have some expertise in that asset class as well.
That's one of the things I wanted to ask you about that actually I kind of skipped over, which is like when you're coming up in the brokerage space, you're seeing these guys on the other side of you you're making pretty good money probably, but you're seeing people on the other side of the transaction making a lot more. Tell me about what that made you feel and what was it that drove you to take the next step into becoming an owner operator?
So I hate to ruin that question, but it was actually not an experience I had a lot of because I was doing primarily net leased retail, and a huge percentage of net lease retail owners, they just buy the properties and sit on them until the leases expire. It's a 20-year Dollar General lease or a 15-year Dollar General lease. So yeah, you would see they bought it for X and they sold it for Y, but there also wasn't a lot of syndication in that space. So when you would see people, it was all their money. So it really wasn't something I experienced a lot of.
Fascinating. Okay, cool, man. Let's dive into the lightning round. My first question to you is, what is the best vacation you've ever taken?
I went on 2 vacations with my wife last year. I'm gonna say it was the one we went to, Italy and France in the spring of 2022. Great time.
What was your favorite city, just out of curiosity?
It was a small French town. I'm gonna mispronounce it. Gourds? Gourd? There
Haven't
is
been
a
there. So.
movie with Russell Crowe called A Good Year that is pretty much set in that town. It's a lovely Manebre. That was it. Menerbes or something like that. I couldn't pronounce it. I met my wife in French class, so I don't know any French. I was not paying attention to the class.
Ah. Okay, cool. Favorite book of any kind?
It might be The Lords of Discipline by Pat Conroy. Really enjoyed that book. Had to read it in high school. It's the only book from high school I think I've reread multiple times.
Cool. I haven't heard that one. I'll have to check it out. How about this, man? How much of your success do you attribute to mindset?
I can't assign a number to that. I'm fine. We'll say 50%. I can assign a number to it. If you don't have the mindset of taking responsibility for other people's capital, then you're never going to get off the ground in an industry where you have to take responsibility for other people's capital. And you've probably had conversations with people like that as well, but they just don't want the responsibility of potentially losing people's money.
Well,
If you
yeah,
don't
it's
have that
super scary.
mindset, you're not going anywhere.
It can definitely be scary, especially if you're coming up. I think that's a major roadblock for a lot of people. They don't want to get involved because they can't imagine taking care of somebody's. And that's a big confidence issue, a limited mindset kind of thing. Because I believe that if you can associate yourself with the strongest people instead of trying to do it yourself, you can leverage their track record and hopefully you pick somebody that's really good, not somebody that's just spiritual, but that actually has what you mentioned earlier, a great customer retention rate. So those are my words to kind of live by. How long do you want to live?
I always say I want to live until slightly before my wife dies. I don't want to have to deal with her passing. She's much more emotionally strong than I am, so I don't have a number. I want to go first.
Okay, short answer on this. Best way to raise capital from your perspective.
Call 5 people, ask them for the smallest amount possible, and then ask them for 5 friends.
Tell me about a moment that changed the trajectory of your life.
The first deal my brother and I did when we technically started Matheson Capital in 2015, we did it as a hard money lender. That was our first ever deal, 23 years old, got a hard money loan for $1 million. Probably wouldn't have had the confidence to do this if I hadn't done that successfully.
What would you need in order to 10x your business?
The answer is more equity. That's the only way you can 10x anything in real estate.
Biggest difference between who you are now versus who you were in high school?
Self-discipline, maturity, all the normal stuff.
Few more
I mean, I
questions
am
here.
married. My high school self wasn't. So does that count?
Hilarious. Couple more questions here. Do your spiritual philosophies have anything to do with your success in business?
Some core level, I'm sure they do, but I don't draw a direct link.
Have you ever experienced a miracle or had a near death experience?
I don't believe I have.
All right. Last question brought to you by Shiana Amigo, one of our great listeners. She would like to know, what impact would you like to leave in the world?
The number one impact that I will have in the world would be on my direct family, my children. So I want
I
to
love
put them
that.
in a better position than I'm in.
I love that. Sometimes people are just like, oh, I want to affect the world this way. Sometimes just affecting yourself and affecting the person that you're looking at in the mirror or your own immediate family is the most powerful answer that you can give, at least in my opinion. So great answers on the lightning round. Love that part of the show. Shout out to the Capital Raiser Nation. Thanks for tuning in. Please leave us a 5-star written review. Shout out to our sponsors, the Family Office Club, and our newest sponsor, Invest Next. All right, Will, how does the audience get a hold of you, my friend?
So the best way to get a hold of me is either through LinkedIn, Will Matheson on LinkedIn. They can also email me directly at will, at mathcap.com. That's mathcap.com.
Okay, cool, man. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for the aspiring capital raiser or syndicator as they scale on their journey?
And we covered it earlier. I think the most important thing is to start small. And because I already said that, I'll add on one more thing. Start locally. Pick a market. If you have a large investor base in Charleston, South Carolina, which is where a lot of ours is, 'cause that's where we're based, it's a lot easier when you're starting out. If you're buying assets in Charleston, South Carolina, they can get your investors can see the properties because you're still building that trust. It's a lot harder if they have to drive 5 hours to do it. Start small, start local.
Very cool, Will, man. This has been a blast, dude. I really appreciate you coming on the show, man.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.